Welcome to Exploring A Course in Miracles. I'm Emily Bennington here with Circle founder Robert Perry, and today we are doing something that we haven't done in the 4-year history of this podcast, and that is we are beginning a 6-part series on the 10 traits of the spiritually advanced. If you are a regular listener to this podcast, you may know that we normally cover one topic per episode. Occasionally, we will have a 2-part series, but this time we are going all the way in for a full month and a half to cover each of these traits and what the Course has to say about them with you. This series is inspired by a section of the Manual for Teachers in A Course in Miracles called What Are the Characteristics of God's Teachers? And what the Course has to say about these characteristics and why they matter is really something. We all have a longing in us to grow and to develop on our spiritual journey. I doubt you would be listening to a podcast like this if that wasn't the case. And we also have a longing in us to be good people. And what's interesting about this particular section of the Course is that it's essentially saying that these are the same thing. So in other words, your spiritual development is tied to your goodness of character in some really important ways that we look forward to discussing with you over the coming weeks. The plan is that today we are going to cover the introduction to the section and the first trait, which is trust. And then we'll cover 2 traits per week over the next 4 weeks. And then we'll wrap up on week 6 with the final trait and a closing. So, Robert, that was a long intro, but before we get into the section itself, are there any framing thoughts that you'd like to offer on this section of the manual, the characteristics of God's teachers, or this series in general?
Well, first, I enjoyed your long intro. And in terms of the section, I think it's a beautiful depiction of what a human being could be. I think that, there are depictions all over the world of, from this tradition or that tradition of what kind of person they're trying to produce. What are the character traits of that person? And this is one of those. But I find it particularly inspiring to think that we could actually be like this. And so I'm hoping that over the next weeks, the series will help people get in touch with a person that maybe way deep down inside they have dreamed to be, and perhaps they can now believe is actually possible for them to be.
Yeah, I love the idea that the culmination of these traits is an advanced teacher of God. And when we say teacher of God, the manual is talking specifically to those who are teaching the course to other pupils, but you can really generalize this to anyone. If you care about being a good human, these are the traits that you should be seeking to develop. And it's just a wonderful and fascinating idea. It's like if you were sitting across the table from Jesus and saying, "Hey, who do you want me to be?" This is his answer. And
Mm-hmm.
we have it, and so we can get to work now on developing these traits for ourselves.
Yeah. And though the manual is generally directed at teachers of God within the course's path, it starts out in section 1 talking about teachers of God all over the world. They come from all religions and from no religion. And you basically qualify for this by making a single deliberate choice in which you see someone else's interests as being the same as yours. So everyone's called to this role, and you actually step into it in that moment when you say, hey, that person's interests are exactly the same as mine. Their gain is my gain.
So often in spirituality, we think the goal is altered states, to have that great mind-blowing spiritual experience. But what he's talking about here in this section is altered traits. And
Yeah.
so do you want to speak to that distinction between states and traits and why it matters to us on our spiritual journey?
Yeah, well, I think we have to credit Houston Smith, the great scholar, late great scholar of world religion. He coined that contrast. Got a couple of quotes from him here. He said, the goal of spiritual life is not altered states, but altered traits. And he also said, when there are miles to go before we sleep, altered traits are more important than altered states. And he was somebody with, he was one of the seminal figures in the early psychedelic revolution that kind of came out of Harvard with Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, who became Ram Dass. So he knew the territory of altered states very, very well. And I think what we can say in keeping with, sort of in keeping and adding to what he said, is not just that altered traits are the goal, they are. Okay, they are more important. They are what we're shooting for on the spiritual path is that true goodness of character. That's our ticket into eternity.
I'll just share very briefly that before I came to the circle, many of you listening know I used to teach mindful leadership, and this is a topic at the core of my heart, because one of the things that I centered my whole mindfulness curriculum around was what I called the VIG pyramid. It was virtues, intentions, and goals. And the virtues were at the bottom. They were the base of the pyramid, and the goals were the very tip top of the pyramid. And the idea was that you spent each day focusing on who it is that you want to be, and the goals that you want to achieve will be the outcome of that. And so how we tend to think of life is that we focus on the goal, and then who we want to be comes out of that, but that's not true. It's the other way around. And so I'm particularly fond of this section for that reason.
Yeah, I love that. I think just before we move on, we should say that altered states are hugely important in the course. They're really essential means to getting to those altered traits. But let's see their relationship that way. One is means and the other is end. If you have all the altered states in the world, but you don't actually use them to get to that end, what have you achieved?
All right, so let's get into them. We're going to begin by reading the first two paragraphs of this section. It's the introduction to all of the characteristics, so it feels important. It's not too long, but I'll share it with you now. It says, the surface traits of God's teachers are not at all alike. They do not look alike to the body's eyes. They come from vastly different backgrounds. Their experiences of the world vary greatly, and their superficial quote-unquote personalities are quite distinct. Nor at the beginning stages of their functioning as teachers of God have they yet acquired the deeper characteristics that will establish them as what they are. God gives special gifts to his teachers because they have a special role in his plan for atonement. Their specialness is, of course, only temporary, set in time as a means of leading out of time. These special gifts, born in the holy relationship towards which the teaching-learning situation is geared, becomes characteristic of all teachers of God who have advanced in their own learning. In this respect, they are all alike. All differences among the sons of God are temporary. Nevertheless, in time, it can be said that the advanced teachers of God have the following characteristics. Okay, Robert, there's so much there.
Yeah, there's a lot we probably want to point out before we just move past this. First of all, he's saying very clearly that this is about the advanced teachers of God. And if you look at the descriptions of each characteristic, they're stated in such extreme form that they add up to a person that's a very rare human being. Okay. He says, obviously, at the start, that the advanced teachers of God have different surface characteristics. Okay, they look different, their personalities are different, their backgrounds, etc. But
can we just pause on that for a moment?
Yeah,
he is appreciating that teachers of God, those who have these traits, look differently. They don't wear the same things. They don't have the same color skin. They don't do the same rituals. He is open to a vast degree of diversity here. And
yeah,
I like that about it.
yeah, me too. And then yet they have the same deeper characteristics, which are the 10 characteristics he's about to explore. They all have those. He says all differences are temporary, which means even if we are currently scoundrels, that's temporary. We're going to be up there with the saints at some point, every single one of us, which is a great idea. He says that these characteristics, which are basically character traits, this is about character, they are gifts from God. It's like we don't make these things happen in us. They flower in us under the right condition as gifts from God, which is kind of reassuring, I think.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that these are gifts of God, but he says in here that they're born in the holy relationship. So what does that mean for us?
Well, he's speaking particularly about the holy relationship between teacher and pupil because he's just been talking about that for a couple of sections.
It's also the
But
manual for
manual for teachers, but we can broaden it. I mean, he envisions holy relationships as something that are so transformative that both people are changed and the pupil becomes a teacher and the teacher becomes an advanced teacher with the 10 characteristics. So we can either think into our experience or just imagine a relationship in which you are changed because of that relationship. Something is born in you. He uses the word born here. Something is born in you that would not have been born without that relationship. That's a great idea.
That's an amazing idea. Okay, so just to summarize here, there's surface characteristics. We all look different, we sound different, we do different things, different personalities. He's not concerned with that. The deeper characteristics are what he is concerned with. Those are all the same in the advanced teachers of God. And the traits are a gift of God. They're born in the holy relationship. Is there anything I missed in
I
that
don't think
recap that
so.
we should be covering before we move on?
I don't think so. I think we said it.
Okay, so let's move on to trust. He says some very big things right out of the gate. The first sentence here is that trust is the foundation on which we can fulfill our function. And then at the beginning of the next characteristic, he says that all the other ones rest on trust. So trust is, would you say, the most important characteristic of
Well,
the teachers?
it's the foundation for their function and the foundation for the rest of the characteristics. It's mentioned in the remaining 9 characteristics. It's mentioned in 7 of them explicitly. And in the rest of the manual, it's mentioned in 6 of the remaining sections in the manual. So it's a huge thing. We have to see this as like the birthplace of the teacher of God, of his function, and of who he is as a person.
Okay, so if trust is so important, let's get into what exactly are we placing our trust in?
That's a big question, and he doesn't say a lot about it. But if you read the
Great.
section really sensitively, he does talk about it in the very first sentence. He says, the teachers of God have trust in the world because they have learned that it is not governed by the laws the world made up. It is governed by a power, capital P, that is in them, but not of them. And as a course student, you have to think that refers to the Holy Spirit. So what we're trusting in becomes the Holy Spirit's governance of the world. And as you can see in the paragraphs that follow, it's really his governance of the local world, like the immediate circumstances of our lives. So that's what we're trusting. We're trusting that he's got it all in hand.
Well, he
And
needs to step it up because this world is on fire. So, what would you say to someone who's like, really? You think the Holy Spirit's got this?
well, what I would
Look
say
around, Robert.
yeah, I mean, he doesn't look like he's doing a great job. What I would say is that the world is coming out of our free choices. And then as we make each free will choice, he then responds by surrounding us with exactly the circumstances we really need for our journey to God. So it's like we're in a classroom. If you're in a classroom, as students make their choices to learn or not to learn, to act out, to not do their homework, to do their homework, whatever they're doing, the teacher should be responding with the right learning conditions that that particular student needs given their choices. So both are always going on. We're making lots of mistaken choices in this world, and the Holy Spirit is constantly responding second by second to surround us with what we need educationally given our choices.
Yeah, I think that really is the summarization of what's going on here. The Course says that external conditions are caused by the thoughts of many, not all of whom are pure of heart yet. And so there is a plan for all of us to go home. There's a plan for our salvation, but we are not in alignment with that plan. And there's two reasons for that. One is that we don't know it's there, number one. And two, we don't trust it. So, what do you want to say about those two things? I know you've started to touch on them, but what do you want to say about the fact that there is a plan that governs the world and our lives? And then we can get into how we can trust it.
Yeah, well, I think that's one way to talk about this characteristic of trust. We're trusting in his plan. And the plan is mentioned twice in this section. So that's another way to talk about trusting. And yet, we have a big couple of hurdles to get over there. One hurdle is like, is there really a plan? Like, honestly, because it looks like chaos, right? So it takes, I think, a whole process in our lives to trust that there actually is a real plan operating all around us all the time. And then the other thing that you're talking about is, okay, once we believe there's a plan, once we know from experience, I'll say there is a plan, we have to actually trust it. And those are kind of separate. You don't know there's a plan from experience, and then automatically you trust it starting right then.
So there's a section of the Course, chapter 16, section 2, was it the power of holiness? We cover that typically at the new year, and it's Jesus telling Helen, you think that your life is unaffected by the insertion of God in it, but if you look around, you can see evidence of God's presence in your life. And I think that's true, obviously, of all of us. We tend to walk around thinking that, who are we, that God has some kind of direct role in our lives? Why would he insert himself into our lives? But if we go deeper and really sit with that question, we can see all the ways in which a higher hand has actually been with us all along. So,
Yeah.
do you want to say anything about that?
Well, that's been, I mean, if you think, first of all, if you think about Helen and Bill, they had some pretty striking evidence that there was a higher hand at work in their lives. Halfway through the text, a lot had happened to them that was very hard to explain by any normal means. Helen was clearly what today would be called a kind of a scientific skeptic. And she had experienced so much that looked so intentional, but with an intention beyond the human, that it would be hard to deny that there was a plan at work.
And also, you and I have a shared career experience where we had envisioned ourselves off in a life of one career, and God came in and through a series of events that are separate for both of us said, nope, I think I'm going to use those skills over here. And here we are. This is
Right.
not the life that either of us envisioned, and yet
Or
this
wanted.
is what we're doing. And so for me, and I know for you, I am 100% convinced that that was the insertion of God into my life. It was so clear that he wanted my career, and I gave it to him, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
So anyway, where
And it may not be that easy to switch over to the plan. I mean, it as you know, it took me 10 years of not liking, his plan to finally say, okay, uncle, I get it. You were a bit quicker with
yeah,
it, but it's
not
not
just a
like
matter of months. So
it's
I'm
not
kidding. It
like
was a little longer than that.
we thought, oh, we'd like to switch to this new thing, and then we switched and said, and that was God's plan.
Yeah.
We were kind of dragged kicking and screaming.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think a lot of people here know I was really committed to teaching mindful leadership. It's a far more lucrative and far more culturally accepted career path. And I made all kinds of bargains saying, okay, God, let me teach the course, but call it mindfulness. And that didn't work. And he wrestled me to the ground until I said, uncle, like you. And not long after that, I washed up on the shore of the circle. So, question though, we're talking about this plan, the Holy Spirit's plan, and we're going to get deeper into the trust section in just a second. But where does that meet free will?
It's basically what we've said. It's we're making our free choices, and the Holy Spirit is constantly responding. I think he has a prior plan. Okay, I think everyone comes in with a lot of specifics in terms of the plan for their life. But I think for the most part, we don't fulfill like plan A. We make a lot of choices that are not quite as maybe what he hoped for. And so he just moves to plan B and to plan C and to plan D and so on and so forth. He has lots and lots of contingency plans. So I think we should think of the plan as full of all those contingency plans, and therefore incredibly, infinitely flexible as we make our choices and as we go down perhaps different paths than plan A would have had us go down.
You and I like this movie with Matt Damon and Emily Blunt called The Adjustment Bureau. And for anyone who's struggling to grasp this idea, just watch that movie, because there's a lot of what we're talking about in there where human beings, characters in the movie, make choices that the angels are like, they have to adjust their plans based on what the humans are doing, but at the same time there's like a master plan that the humans can't really violate, and all of that is at play here with us. As we come in with a plan, we are meant to learn certain lessons, we're meant to achieve certain things. We can go off track, but we can't go too far off track, or the big capital P plan will adjust, and God comes into your life and tells you to work at the circle.
If it gets really bad, that's what happens.
Okay, so
let me go on with a really important distinction here. Okay, because we're talking about trust, really amounts to trust in the plan. But I think we have to keep in mind that there are two different aspects of that. And both of those aspects play a key role in the whole long description of how we develop trust in this section. One aspect is the plan is at work, as this section says, in all things, events, encounters, and circumstances. It's somehow governing, and he uses that word, all things, events, encounters, and circumstances, making sure that they're all helpful. They're all helpful on our journey. Okay. And so that dimension of the plan does not require our participation. Whatever we do, it's going on all the time. He's constantly moving the chess. We move our chess piece, and then he moves all the rest of them around us in response. Okay. Without our participation. But the second aspect is all about our participation. This is where the plan gets communicated to us through guidance, and guidance can be an inner voice. It can be intuitions. It can be thoughts and promptings we don't even think of as from anyone but us. So this guidance is streaming in or trying to stream in at all times in different forms. And then once it streams in, we have to follow it or not. So that dimension of the plan involves us. We get notified of what the plan is, and then we have to then take action and follow it. So there's these two aspects, where without our involvement, it's just orchestrating the stuff of our lives. And then with our involvement is telling us what to do, hoping we'll do it.
And the plan is really, it's about how we get home to God. It's about our special function that we have along the way, how we make our contribution to the healing of the world that enables us to learn our lessons that bring us home to God. And then there's all kinds of people that are involved in that, and we learn our lessons in these relationships. And so when we're talking about the plan, it sounds maybe kind of ominous to some people, but really at the end of the day, that's all we're doing here is we are learning the lessons that we need to learn to become the people that we need to be to go home, and we're healing, hopefully, and growing in relationship along the way.
We have a function to carry out. We have, as you're saying, certain people we're supposed to meet. There are many passages in the Course that act like everybody we encounter, that encounter was arranged. Every encounter was arranged.
Which is amazing, because we see so many people at the grocery store. We just pass them by. We're on elevators together, passing on escalators. It's like everybody who interacts or encounters one another is meant to meet. That's incredible.
It's incredible. And the Course is really clear about that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's 6 periods of development here in this section that induce us to make the shift to trust. And we're going to go through each one of these one by one and just flesh them out a bit. So the first period is called the period of undoing. So can you talk a little bit about that? I think, first of all, before we get into these, if you're listening to this and you're struggling with the idea of trust or curious about it, you will see yourself somewhere in these periods. So as we go through them, be on the lookout for that. So
and almost inevitably think you're further along than you are in the process.
Yeah,
let's just say that too.
That's true. That's true for anything you say. Like,
Yeah.
There's all these stages of spiritual development, and if there's 5, people are like, I think I'm at 4.
4.5. Yeah.
Right. Anyway, so the first one is the period of undoing. Talk to me about that.
To understand the period of undoing, you have to understand that the whole process is one where we are giving the Holy Spirit, we are trusting him in taking full charge of what's valuable in our lives and should stay, and what's valueless and should go. That we're just giving him complete trust in that area, which basically means, giving him complete charge of our lives. So the first period, the period of undoing, is where we're a newly born teacher of God. Okay. And now he swoops in and starts taking things out of our lives. And seemingly without our involvement, we just things just get taken away. And he's doing that to show us that those things really were valueless. And therefore it's okay that they go from our lives. And even it's a good thing that they go. And so what happens is we can't just learn that internally. It requires them to go so that we say, oh, wait, it's fine that it's gone. Or we say, oh,
I didn't need that career.
Right. Or we say, I'd rather realize it was valueless and let it go than just sit here and suffer forever at the fact that it's gone. So either way, we're kind of getting pushed into the realization that it was valueless by what he's done.
This is fascinating. He says in here that this period of undoing need not be painful, but is usually so experienced. And I think that's true. On the spiritual journey, we all go through this period of undoing, and we do typically experience it as painful. It's the ending of relationships. It's the moving away from careers. It's what else? What else can get taken away?
All kinds of things, material things. Your bank account can virtually be
You're
taken
bankrupt,
away.
right?
Yeah.
Right. And so, as you're saying, it's rarely understood that their lack of value is just being recognized. So they're being taken away so that we can understand their lack of value. And it's not meant to be painful, but that's how we experience it. Okay, so that's the
And
period of undoing.
let me just add that that is absolutely that first aspect of the plan I was talking about, where he just does stuff in your life without it requiring your participation.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So I just want to note that.
Okay, so the next period is the period of sorting out. Talk to us about that.
Okay, so the idea is that the Holy Spirit in the first period has come in and has taken things away so that you'll realize their valuelessness. And now you think, hey, that's a principle. And you think, well, I should take that principle and now apply it myself. So I should go into my life and decide what things are valueless and what things are valuable. And that's the sorting out that you do.
That's fine. That's exactly what we do. It's like, okay, I get it. Some things here aren't valuable. They're not as valuable as I've made them out to be. I'll take it from here, God, and I'll determine
Right.
what is valuable and what's valueless. Got it. Thanks for the tip. And I've got it now.
It
Yeah.
sounds like, I mean, you're making it sound like it's all wrong. And I think there is something wrong in there that we'll get to later, but he does treat it as a necessary part of the process at the same time.
We just screw it up.
Yeah.
So then the third period is the period of relinquishment. What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, it's an obvious next step after the period of sorting out, because you've got these two piles now. Okay. You've got the valuable and you have the valueless all in your life. And I assume this includes the interior part of your life as well. Okay. And then in the period of relinquishment, you actually have to give up the stuff in the second pile, like the valueless. It's kind of like you've gone in your garage and you sorted everything into keep pile and throw away pile. Now you actually have to throw away that second pile, which is, I think, for us, a scary proposition, harder than the sorting out.
Robert, I think what you just said is incredibly important. So when we talk about the period of undoing where things are removed from our life, oftentimes it does feel like they're external, their relationships, their material things. Then we have the period of sorting out where we have to decide what's valuable and what's valueless. And then we got this period of relinquishment where we give up what's valueless. And I imagine there's a lot of people who are listening who are thinking exclusively that this applies to the material things in our lives, the external events of our lives. And you just said that this is true for our interior life as well. And so an example of that would be, we realize that love is really all that we're doing here. And so that's the valuable internal state. And we have to relinquish our ego, and that's painful.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure he must be including the interior dimension, even though the way it all sounds, it more sounds like, the stuff in your life as well. I mean, it sounds mostly like the stuff in your life to me, but it's got to include the other, one would think.
Yeah, he talks about the period of relinquishment engendering enormous conflict and distress. And so what would you say to someone who maybe recognizes themselves in this period and they're in that distress and finding it hard to trust through that process?
Well, what he goes on to say under that heading is that only once you actually give things up do you feel not loss and sacrifice, but you feel a happy lightheartedness. You feel freer. And I think that's the key, is like, once you do it, you feel better. As long as you're contemplating it, you feel afraid.
I do think that people who have gone through some of this undoing land in a place that they couldn't have expected or anticipated, and then realize the place that they landed was actually better for them in the end. I've been kind of picking fun of my own career all through this podcast, but at the end of the day, professionally speaking, I've never been happier. And I didn't want this for myself. I didn't choose this for me. God did. It felt like a sacrifice to walk away from the things that I walked away from, including public acceptance, and come into this work, because it's fringe and weird and whatnot. And so it feels like a sacrifice. It hurts. It's distressful. And then you realize it. I can't hold it with happy lightheartedness, because it is a gift. Actually, the last sentence in this paragraph says, where he thought something was asked of him, he finds a gift bestowed on him. And so
Yeah.
if you get through the periods and you land in that place, you realize, oh, I actually have more basis to trust now, because I know that God knows better for me what I really need.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Whenever you're like, yep, I know, it's like, move on, Emily. So the next period is the period of settling down. So what do you want to say about that?
So the idea here is that you've been through this lengthy, clearly pretty arduous process. Every one of the three initial periods has comments about it being difficult, or at least almost certainly difficult. And so in the fourth period of settling down, you kind of rest. You start to, as he says, consolidate your learning. You look at the whole long stretch and you say, you know what? It all added up to keep what's valuable and let go of what's not. So you start to learn the big lesson from that. And you also gather mighty companions for your journey ahead. But you also think you have learned more than you thought. You're getting ready for the real thing. You
He
think
knows
you've
us
just
so well, doesn't
yeah,
he?
you
He's
think you've
like,
completed the real thing, but you're just getting ready for it.
yeah. He's like, you're not as advanced as you think you are. Sit down, or settle down.
Yeah, right.
So in this part, he says, you give up what you do not want and you keep what you do. And then you realize how simple is the obvious and how easy to do. And so you're now moving into this place where you realize it's actually not as hard as I thought it was to give up what is valueless and doesn't matter and doesn't serve me in the end.
Maybe, but you haven't really done it yet.
You're not as far along as you think.
Right. You've grasped the principle based on the first three periods, but you haven't really done it, the actual sorting and letting go and so on.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are stuck in that place where it's like you intellectually understand what's being asked of you, but you're not willing to do it. Do you want to say anything about that?
No, just that there's a lot I want to say about trust in general. So I'm kind of wanting to get through
Okay,
the
because you gotta go.
periods. Yeah.
Okay, can we just say one quick thing here about the mighty companions? Like this, what's interesting about this period is that he says that mighty companions will join you and you won't walk alone. So
Right.
talk about that for a second.
Well, there's no elaboration. So we don't really know who they are. All we know is that they're on the same journey as us now. They are lending us their strength. They're mighty companions. And, they could be, at least in part, if not exclusively, our pupils, because he says the teacher of God, once he makes the choice to become a teacher of God, his pupils then look for him and find him. So that certainly fits this idea that the newly born teacher of God has gone through these three periods, and now he meets his mighty companions. Who knows?
Okay, do you want to cover the final two in one go?
I
The
think
final two are the period of unsettling and the period of achievement. So,
I think that would be great.
okay.
So you've just settled down, period number 4, and now the next one is a period of unsettling. And what's going on is you had driven the process too much yourself. You had done the sorting out and relinquishing and so on. You had decided what was what, but you didn't really know your true best interests. You didn't really know what was truly valuable for you, what was truly valueless for you. And so now you have to attain this state that may remain impossible for a long, long time, he says. And that is, you must learn to ask in every circumstance what you really want, not what you think you want. And that is that second aspect of the plan. The first aspect was the Holy Spirit just does stuff out here without our cooperation. The second step is we listen to him and do what he says. So he, in the first period, he just like took stuff out of our lives and we thought, oh, well, I learned a lesson from that. I'm going to extend that myself. In the fifth period, we say, no, I'm going to rely upon the Holy Spirit to extend that principle. Hang on to the valuable, keep the, let go of the valueless.
And you have to realize yourself what's valuable and what's valueless. Otherwise, it's just going to look like he took it away. And that's painful.
Right. And you've got to trust him. You've got to trust him. When he says, in this situation, here is what you really want, you've got to trust him. So this is trust, right? You learn to trust somewhat in that first period that the things he took away, you actually really wanted him to take away. In the fifth period, you need to trust him in every situation that what he's going to tell you about what to keep and what to ditch is actually in your best interests. And that is like that's the real learning of trust here.
And what it says here is the idea of sacrifice, so central to his own thought system, has made it impossible for us to judge. And so we have to rely on the Holy Spirit to do that judgment for us, because when he does it, there is no sacrifice.
Right. We're so afraid he's going to take away the good stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So
the last one, the period of achievement, is where we finally learn to do that. We finally learn to really trust him in all circumstances. We trust everything he's doing on the outside, and we trust all the guidance he's giving us on the inside. And so in that trust, he has complete charge over our lives, and we completely rest in that. And what he says is the result of that. Early on in the section, he says the result is a sense of strength. And here he says the result is a sense of tranquility, so that even in the quote unquote emergencies, we retain our tranquility because we are just trusting everything on the outside and all of his guidance on the inside. And so now we are in a process of achieving real trust, which I think what he's talking about here, I think it goes way beyond any kind of trust we have now. I mean, you and I were talking, before we tried this last time, about how trust has been this kind of trust in the plan, has been a central lesson in both of our journeys. And yet the kind of trust he's really talking about, it's still in the distance. It's down the road.
Yeah, he says that this is the state of real peace. And so much of what we're seeking on the spiritual journey is that sense of peace, which we can have if we trust that the Holy Spirit is governing all things in the world, governing all things in our lives. And we go through this process ourselves to sort out what's valuable from what's valueless, to ask him and listen to and follow the guidance that we receive. So, Robert, just to wrap this up, it seems like trust really should be a value for us, that we need to place a value on developing trust. So what closing thoughts do you have on this?
Yeah,
trait?
well, I think for me, the closing thought is the value of the trusting stance in life. Like when you don't trust, it's all about you have to control everything. And then in the state of trust, it's the opposite. We don't have to control. We trust something larger than ourselves. We rest on an arm, the Holy Spirit's, and we can relax in life in a way that you absolutely cannot without trust. even if you're the perfect controller, you have all the security systems in place and everything all mapped out, and you're secured your retirement plan with infinite care and so on, you can never relax as much without trust as you can with trust. And the last thing that I want to say, this is something I think I've just recently come to through our process around this episode, is that the reason the other characteristics rest on trust is that only when you're trusting can you afford to be good. Right? We all want to have the other characteristics. We all want to be honest. We want to be gentle. We want to be generous. We want to be patient. Why aren't we those things? We feel we can't afford them, right? In a universe we don't trust, we just don't have room to be those things without great risk. If I tell the truth, what will the risk be? If I am gentle, what will the risk be? If I am generous, if I'm defenseless, if I'm patient, it's too dangerous. And so interestingly, twice he uses the word afford. He says only the trusting can afford honesty. He mentions under patience that only those who are certain of the outcome, which is basically, a form of trust. Well, it is a form of trust. He does talk about trust in that characteristic. Only those who are certain of the outcome can afford patience. So trust is the basis for all the rest of the characteristics, because only in that trusting stance toward life can you afford to be good.
Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you're worried that something's going to be taken away, which will be a sacrifice to you.
Right.
And
you will have been a good person. People will be inspired by your example, and you'll be toast.
mm-hmm. Yeah, before we close, I just want to underscore what you were saying about that cycle of trust and being good. I think that there's so much in that. So we trust, and if we don't trust, then we have to control. And in the process of controlling, we can't be good, because in the process of controlling, what are we doing? We're demanding, we're holding grievances,
We're fudging with the truth.
We're fudging with the truth. We're trying to shoehorn people into doing what it is that we want them to do. And if control is the goal, then we can't be good. So you sacrifice being good when you're in that mode of control. But if you're in the mode of trust, you can afford to be good. Amazing.
Exactly. Isn't that great?
That's so great.
And one last thing. I know we have to go, but I've been doing.
Go. I could stay here and do this all day.
I know. I've been doing these searches online for the last couple of weeks of lists of characteristics, like the fruits of the spirit from Christianity, or the 5, virtues from Confucianism, or the 4 virtues from Sikhism. And there's all kinds of lists everywhere. Everybody wants to know what it means to be a good person. And it's hard to find trust in this sense on those lists. There's trust of other people, but this idea of trust in something higher, something good governing everything, governing your life, it's not on the lists. And what that says to me is we can aspire to these characteristics, but without that foundation, how much are we going to succeed in having them?
Well, I guess we will have to leave it at that. Robert, thank you so much. I think this was a good conversation. It's a re-record, but we did it better this time. I think we landed the plane. And the next week, we will be covering the next 2 traits, which are honesty and tolerance. And we hope that you will all join us for that conversation as well. Robert, thank you so much. And thanks to those of you who are joining us live today. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.